are these people?
270 violations, Care Bear. So Israel has violated the ceasefire 270 times and counting since February the 13th. So it's now the 19th on the day of this recording. So do you think they could have violated it more in that time? I'm going to go with probably. So this is from Robert Inlakesh over at MintPress. Links are always in the description below if you want to actually go read the article. You know, it's always like you see all these little blue links. You can go click those. Sometimes those are more information. Nice. But while Hamas announced a delay in the next round of prisoner exchanges, prompting accusations that it violated the ceasefire, Israel has been in breach of the agreement since the first hours of its implementation on January 19th. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made it clear from the outset that he viewed the deal as merely a temporary pause. Just one day before the ceasefire was set to take effect, Netanyahu publicly declared President Trump and President Biden have given a full backing to Israel's right to return to combat. Notice how both of them are there, right?
Right.
Emphasizing that the truce would not be permanent.
And again, I said, sorry.
Yes,
I said
continue,
please. Ceasefire, and we checked the definition. The implication of a ceasefire is temporary, because it's the idea like if there were two warring factions, and to be clear, they have to be like the idea of war is that they are equal somewhat in terms of resources, economics, whatever. Like it's literally a means to take a break from fighting so that you can restock your like food or like weapons or like whatever else you need, because there is an art to war. It's not necessarily just bam, bam, bam. Like that. I don't want to say ethics in war, but in that kind of sense, I guess there is. But it was a means for you to refuel and recoup, check in on your men, casualties and all that kind of stuff. But it's going to start again.
The 76th rule of acquisition.
So the idea of people
every once in a while declare peace. It confuses the hell out of your enemies.
Right. So the idea that people were calling for a ceasefire at these protests was bullshit, because within that definition, it meant temporary. It's not, you could say permanent, but I would almost rather you say end it, right? If you're going to go for a permanent ceasefire, because it's just like a state of limbo. So, I just want to make that distinction again to people, because that's what the implication traditionally means with a ceasefire. It's always meant to be a temporary thing.
Yeah.
So it's not meant to be like a permanent thing. Otherwise, you'll come to a deal to end it, essentially.
Yep, which we'll get into. So the ceasefire was scheduled to begin at 8:30 a.m. local time, January 19th, yet in the final 30 minutes before its implementation, Israel officials threatened to scrap the deal, citing Hamas's delay in submitting a list of 3 Israeli captives set to be exchanged for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners later that day. The agreement contained no clause allowing Israel to postpone the truce on these grounds. At the ceasefire deadline that morning, Israeli military spokesman Daniel Hagari announced that military operations would continue until Hamas provided the required list of captives. In the interim, Palestinians briefly took to the streets, celebrating what they believed to be the official end of the war. The moment was short-lived. Within 15 minutes, Israeli drones returned to the skies, followed by airstrikes and gunfire from Israeli forces, killing at least 19 Palestinians. Hamas submitted the list soon after, repeatedly insisting that the delay was due to a technical issue. However, the ceasefire did not officially take effect until 11:15 a.m. Despite the delay, Hamas upheld its side of the agreement, releasing 3 Israeli female captives on time. Israel, in contrast, postponed the release of the 92 Palestinian women and children from 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. the next morning. Israeli forces also fired on families waiting near Ramallah in the West Bank for the release of their relatives. So, here's the BBC reporting that forces have opened fire on Palestinians trying to return to their homes.
More worryingly, we're also hearing that despite an Israeli order for people who are displaced not to head back from the south of the Gaza Strip to their homes in the north, some people have been trying to do so. They've broken off trying to use side roads, and we're hearing that several people have been wounded by Israeli ground forces opening fire.
So, even the BBC is doing that.
More
Right.
So, and we know that everything the BBC puts out is filtered heavily for Israel. So, yeah. On January 20th, the first day of the ceasefire, a harrowing video circulated widely on social media, capturing the execution of 15-year-old Zakaria Hamid Yara Babak. The footage showed an Israeli sniper in Rafah shooting the Palestinian teenager. A bystander, Nader Al-Jan, attempted to drag Babak's body to safety. He too came under Israeli fire. Despite the formal ceasefire, airstrikes, incursions, and shootings continued. On January 28th, an Israeli airstrike targeted a horse-drawn cart in Gaza Nusrat area, killing 2 Palestinian civilians, including 5-year-old Nadia Mohammed al-Almudi. Meanwhile, Hamas and other Palestinian factions had not responded with a single bullet or rocket. A document shared with MintPress and other media outlets by a senior Hamas official details what the group claims are 270 recorded Israeli violations of the ceasefire agreement between the 19th and February 11th. According to Hamas, these violations resulted in the death of 26 Palestinians and injuries to 59 others. The report further alleges 105 airspace violations, 36 instances of gunfire, 9 bombardments, 29 unauthorized ground incursions, and the detention of 5 drivers and fishermen. The document states that the occupation's aircraft continued to fly on a near daily basis during the designated prohibition periods, 10 to 12 hours. A total of 105 violations were recorded involving the flighting of reconnaissance planes and drones, including Hermes 450, Hermes 900, Super Haron, Soviet quadcopter, with many of these carrying ammunition, particularly over areas designated for a captive handover. Regarding the prisoner exchange, the document accuses Israel of delaying the handover list of 400 Palestinian prisoners. Specifically, it states that the release of detainees in the third batch was postponed to 11 to 5. Additionally, Hamas claims that Palestinian prisoners were subjected to beatings and humiliation upon their release from Israeli detention centers. The document also highlights Israel's continued obstruction of humanitarian aid, fuel, and essential supplies from entering Gaza, a violation that has been independently documented by multiple sources. Israeli authorities are on record denying entry of critical aid to the civilian population. Rami Abdou, chairman of the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor, underscored the severity of the situation, stating, "Only 9,500 tents, small and poor in quality, have arrived in Gaza, while 120,000 are urgently needed. Hundreds of thousands remain without shelter, yet Israel has failed to fulfill its obligations under the ceasefire." I mean, are you surprised? From the outset,
No.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has signaled his intent to undermine the ceasefire before it could transition into its second phase. Some Israeli officials even proposed prolonging the first phase of the agreement to prevent the war from ending and to maintain the ongoing prisoner exchange. Meanwhile, Trump has taken an aggressive stance, warning that if Hamas fails to release all Israeli captives by noon on Saturday, he will, quote, "open the gates of hell," end quote. So that's where we stand. So before I get into this, any thoughts so far? No.
No, we knew that they would Israel would not hold their end to the bargain as they've done many times as we've seen throughout their history. So and more recently. So you're just kind of preaching to the choir here, at least with our audience.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. But let's so this is from Haaretz, right? Which quote Israeli sources believe Netanyahu intends to derail Gaza ceasefire as delegation heads to Doha. So this is Haaretz saying that that's the intention. So Israeli sources believe Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu intends to sabotage the hostage release deal, and the delegation heading to Qatar will not advance stage 2 of the agreement. It's a show, said one source. Netanyahu is signaling quite clearly that he doesn't want to move to the next phase. He's sending a team without a mandate and without the ability to do anything. The sources believe the images of hostages being freed has significantly hurt Netanyahu in the polls. Right-wing voters see that we haven't defeated Hamas, and its operatives are still roaming with weapons. The signs on stages in Gaza during the hostage return events mock Netanyahu and references his total victory slogan. He said Netanyahu knows he doesn't have a government if he proceeds with the deal. So another source warned that Netanyahu's conduct could jeopardize even the stage 1 of the deal. The process is working, hostages are being released, but Hamas is doing this with the expectation of a second stage, leading to a full ceasefire and Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. Once Hamas realizes there won't be a second stage, they may not complete the first, the source said. Hamas isn't stupid. They see the politicization of the negotiations, the appointment of Netanyahu loyalists Ron Dermer and Gal Hirsch, and the statements from Smotrich and other right-wing ministers threatening to topple the government. They'll understand where this is headed. Although the Israeli delegation's trip to Qatar was meant to mark the start of Stage 2 negotiations, a senior official clarified yesterday that the team would only discuss technical details. Israeli officials declined to specify what these details entail. So, thoughts, Care Bear?
Again, been new. So, again, preaching to the choir. It's, I don't know. This is why Indy has a segment basically saying F Israel for how do we miss that, because we have to, not to say we have to, but it's just more fuck shit that Israel is doing basically every week. Gaza is basically decimated at this point. Mainstream media is not, well, I'll argue mainstream might talk about a little bit more how it relates to Trump, but they're still kind of silent on the details. Like, as far as most people know, ceasefire is happening and hostages are gradually being released. But we knew, and we have to shout like people like we know, like Vanessa Beeley and Ava Bartlett and Fiorella, who have mentioned for a while now that this ceasefire was generally a no-go from the start. So, and yeah, within the article, it says like Hamas knows. Yeah, they're going to know.
Yeah.
But I think their mind is, okay, let's show that we're able to kind of do this in good faith. We're doing our side of the bargain. And I think, and I honestly think, you know, if they kind of had that mindset, especially if they feel like it's going to hurt BB in the long run, then if they're playing the long game like that, then I could see where they're going. However, you got Trump, who don't give a shit. Like, you know, like BB has that fear of being kicked out of government. You know, Biden, not Biden, Trump doesn't. So that's the kind of the only flaw that Hamas. It's not even so much BB is really a non-issue now. Like Trump will just kind of steamroll everything and just be like, you know, off with every last one of them. So I don't want to say like, but if I'm thinking tactically, if I was a Hamas operative, that's what I'm hoping that they're thinking in terms of, like it's not even so much BB would be the issue anymore. It's more or less Trump is going to steamroll things regardless of whether BB does this or not. So I would think that they would account for that, but who knows?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure talking about these things is probably why YouTube demonetizes us. So if you want to support this channel like people have before, you can go to ko-fi.com/indienewsnetwork, scan that QR code on your screen, or get in the description below. But, you know, we get it. Times are tough. If you can't do that, just like and subscribe, hit the share button, leave a comment, do all the stuff that every other channel asks you for to, you know, help us in the algorithm. But otherwise, thanks for watching.